Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Say Report. This is your host, Sejan Sarowick. I was going to say this is your host companion, but no, I am your host.
I am the host companion.
No, look at me. I am the host now.
I have the grapefruit.
I have the conch.
Oh god. Oh yeah, we're doing different things. I'm doing a old magic trick.
I think we were doing a whole bunch of things, is what it
You were
sounds.
doing what? You were doing what? Lord of the Flies?
Well, yes, never mind.
No, I mean that's important. It's important to identify what we're referencing. So it is written.
First it was Captain Phillips. Let's do the list. First it was Captain Phillips, and then you referenced.
And then I referenced Magic Bob Brizendine's
Okay, then it was Lord.
well-known grapefruit trick.
Yes, the super well-known grapefruit trick
If
that
you've
we all.
seen Magic Bob, you know it. I mean, it's
Yes. That is such a great line though. That's a good line to draw in the sand. I mean, it's a good hearty line to draw in the sand.
I mean, I say that before we talk about the fact that you did Lord of the Flies. I think that was it, though, right? Just to
I think we had a Lord of the Flies. Yes.
yeah, like it's such a part of his act that once he didn't get his bag, like his luggage was lost as he flew on to do a show.
I feel like this is a Gallagher story, but keep going.
And it might be a Gallagher story, but that he told the story, and I've seen his act, so I know that the grapefruit. I mean, the grapefruit trick. Oh, do we want to spoil magic? Are we
Yes.
masked magicians?
What here's what we're not. We're not actual magicians. So feel free to spoil the trick. There isn't anybody we owe anything to.
That's true. Also, I'm not like me telling you what the trick is does not tell you how to do the trick. I don't know how to do the
I
trick.
thought you were about to reveal everything.
No, I just like what the trick is. But it's also one of those things that like once you've seen the trick, you can identify it as a well-known magic trick.
So you're not like the masked magician. You're like Leonardo DiCaprio at a party bragging about his best friend David Blaine. But good enough.
Are they best friends? Because
Did
that
you not
really
know that?
settles me in
He,
a way.
he, I won't say that they're best friends because I don't have that knowledge about his love life. But I will say that he loved David Blaine enough to basically do that first special for free. He hosts the first David Blaine special when he made the when he went into a block of ice or something like that. Whatever that big one that he did about 15 years ago. So right around Titanic, I want to say. So 20 years ago.
That
I
would
guess
make
it was.
sense if he hosted him going into a big block of ice
Yeah.
in conjunction with a movie about a boat going into a big block of ice. But so what the
Really
great
was
so
David Blaine in the ice.
David Blaine sunk the Titanic.
Here it is.
I'm learning all sorts of things tonight.
The greatest magic
But
trick.
okay, the grapefruit trick is basically give me $20, and then he puts the $20 in the grapefruit,
So far, so good.
and then he gives the grapefruit to someone in the audience, and then that's the first thing he does, and then throughout the show he says,
It's trick.
"What?"
And trick. Give me $20. All right, this is for you. All right, the end. Ta-da!
I mean, that's great. But what actually is he's like, "Who's got the grapefruit?" And then the guy with the grapefruit has to go, "I've got the grapefruit," and it's just like. I guess it's a thing to keep the audience involved. I don't know. I've seen the trick and it's stuck with me obviously because I often find myself yelling, "I've got the grapefruit."
This is the worst magic trick I've ever heard. Not to insult your best friend, homeless Bob, that does
He's
magic.
not my best friend. He's just a magician that I've worked with on occasion. He brought me to my first strip club. So that's a thing I did with a magician. We have lost the thread.
This is the best sequel to Drop Dead Fred I've ever heard.
But, but yeah, so once they lost his bag because he did other tricks besides the grapefruit trick, and she's like, "I need a grapefruit and a knife to
Also the camera trick.
to the cruise person." And he did his whole show with just stuff provided to him by the ship, and the guy's like, he's the greatest. Like the cruise director raved about how great he was. He's like, because if this is how entertaining he can be when he has none of his props, imagine when he has all of his props. And it's like, no, but basically he just does that grapefruit trick.
I can point out one very strong example of that not working. Carrot Top.
So like at this point, imagine I have like a cell phone and it's a seashell.
How did Carrot Top get a full-fledged movie where he got to be like the marquee
Where
actor
he
in it?
got to be
Done
the
it yet?
executive of the chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board, man.
Because the 90s were a wacky time where
Wacky.
if you were a comedian and people knew who you were, you got the keys to the frigging castle. It's
Yeah.
why it's why right now we're having this argument about comedy and what it means to be a comedian and everything that's going on is because the success of stand-up comedy in the 80s translated to mass market penetration by comedians through the 90s. So in the 2000s, a bunch of people said, well, I'm gonna be a comedian.
Yeah. Everybody wanted to be the next Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to be the next guy making $8 million an episode, writing a show based around their act, their bit, right? Like, I mean, everybody tried to do that. And some people got real close. I mean, like you got your Ray Romanos and your Kevin James, like those guys knocked it out of the park getting their own shows.
You also, I mean, Roseanne,
Louis C-
Tim
Louis
Allen,
CK,
Martin.
like had like a couple of
Martin.
failed ones. Martin was legit. I'll give that show shit every time we bring it up, but
Oh,
that is a
you
pretty
have to
legit
give
show.
that show shit because it was also an excuse for Martin Lawrence to play a bunch of terrible stereotype characters.
Which was his thing. I mean, remember, like
Oh, yeah.
his original movies were like Blue Streak and things like that, where like he did the Eddie Murphy thing. Like, I'm gonna put on a fat suit and play a new character.
That's
Who just
That's
did
Big
that?
Mama's house.
No, Blue Streak. He also does a whole bunch of different characters too. Like he
Does
does
he
the
do a
Pizza
bunch
Man
of
bit in that
characters?
movie.
Oh yeah, he
Yeah.
does. He does the Pizza Man bit. Thank
Like
you.
he
I
does a
forgot
couple of
about
different
that.
ones on top of that too. Yeah.
I know. I
Um,
like Blue Streak a lot, but is that weird scene where like the police commissioner rubs Itch-X on his testicles?
Yeah, and is like super into it. Yeah, that's.
Have we said we're the Say Report yet? I don't know.
Oh man, yeah. Look, if you downloaded this and you weren't aware of what you were getting into at this point,
That's a good point. I just, I don't know. I feel like I've learned so many things today. David Blaine and Leonardo DiCaprio. Had I had more of an internet presence as a movie reviewer in 2007, I could have fought Uwe Boll. Is that how you say his name?
you could probably do that now. That dude seems like he's down for pretty much anything at this point. So
You know what? At me at 21 and him at 42, I feel like I could have Rocky montaged my way to at least not looking like a schmuck. Because like he apparently the 5 people that he said fight me in real life to, he like just knocked out, like straight out.
man, I don't even. Uwe Boll is a weird human.
Right.
He's a guy that is completely unapologetic for the worst career in Hollywood, and you got to give him some credit for that.
Right, it's true. I mean, I don't know, and he's made movies that like he's someone that people know, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, I would have wanted to fight Uwe Boll. Like I would be
I
all
know he
about
did
that.
Blood Rain. Did he do Max Payne as well?
I don't think he did Max Payne.
He was just big on the video game movie.
Far
front for a while,
Cry,
so-
House of the Dead, Postal, like those are the I think those are the 4. If you go to In the Name of the King, a Dungeon
Yep,
Siege tale.
Dungeon Siege tale with our boy there. That's when you started saying he started knocking people out. I was like, did Jason Statham get into it? And did he knock out Jason Statham? Because that's
No,
upsetting.
it was one of those things where like in the halcyon days of the internet, and not even really, basically when like social media was new, people gave him shit for like his movies, and like you think about, everybody wants to say fight me in real life. He actually did it and like paid for people to come out to Vancouver where he was shooting Postal to fight him.
And fight him?
Yes. I watched a YouTube video about it today. I'll shout out. It was Wang. I don't know anything about him. He just came up through the algorithm for me, and he like dives into internet mysteries, and also will sometimes take sojourns to like still active Angel Fire websites.
That are not like porn, or are they always porn?
No, it's like he went through 2 fan sites of Saved by the Bell. He did a couple of backyard wrestling sites.
Hell yeah.
Like it's just oh my god, I remember when this was the internet. I was in such a rush to get home to this.
Right?
And it was not that good. But yeah.
It still isn't, bro. I don't know what to tell you.
That's very true. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I could beat Uwe Boll when I was in college. When I was a little bit lighter and more of a fighter. Like he's
yeah,
just a
man.
brawler. I mean, I beat down with brawlers all the time. The real central thesis here is if you can arrange a fight between me and Uwe Boll, and I have enough time to do like a Rocky training montage, and I mean like Creed 2, we go out to the desert and I learn how to take a punch type training montage.
Nice.
Like, cause that's my favorite.
Is YouTube like the new goal for people out there? I guess not, right? Like we've moved past even YouTube, right? I mean, for a while it was even podcasting. Everybody wanted to be the next Adam Carolla or Joe Rogan. But like as a comedian, like what's your big get now?
As
a Netflix special?
Comedian? I mean, not even a Netflix special. They kind of hand those out like candy. And the big problem with that is everybody wants a Netflix special, but unless you're Chappelle or I think Chris Rock got one for crazy money as well, you're not going to see the numbers that they saw.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know what the goal is. I think honestly the goal as a stand-up is to be able to live. Like you can pay for
I think that's always been the goal, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. But I think now more than ever, if you're going to say that I'm a stand-up, that's your goal.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things why, like, I was never really something I ever aspired to be, was a stand-up comedian, until I started managing that comedy club on board the Carnival ship, and I'm like, oh, this is all it is? Like, and I know that, like, that I don't mean to be, like, to reductive. Downgrade or anything. Yeah, reductive. I don't mean to be reductive at all. But it's like, this is stuff that, like, I do this. Like, I work on bits when I'm alone for fun. I'm not trying to do them in front of an audience.
Yeah,
and I have
think
no
stand-up,
problem
though,
talking to people.
Just to be fair, though, I think stand-up is one of those things that when it's done well, it looks easy.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And that's exactly the problem that we're talking about, right? Is that everybody gets convinced that they can do it because when they see these people that are amazing at it get up in front of 1 million people in a fucking stadium somewhere and knock it out of the park, they think all they did was talk for 2 hours. And have no sense of like the idea of like stage presence and like
and
the ability
timing
to do that.
And there's a lot more that goes into it. For me, is the fact that weirdly working in a club and like, cause I did like warm up for that club a couple of nights, like, and it was fine, and I did fine. It like weirdly intimidated people that I had been on cruise ships, and also like, why don't you stick to cruise ships? When I tried to get into the tiniest niche that existed in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, okay. And like, that's it always, I don't know. I mean, the big thing that I wanted to do, this is weird. I don't even know what this episode is. I have so many other things that I had come to this episode to talk about, but I don't know, just thinking about it.
Because you've given me a fantastic segue into what I've been doing for the past week.
Ooh. Oh my God.
And that's,
a stand-up?
I've been hanging out with Uncle Joey, getting to learn how to be a stand-up comedian.
It's all that first season's about. Uncle. He is not their uncle.
He is so their uncle.
He's not their uncle. He is never called Uncle Joey in the entire run of Full House. I can't speak for Fuller House, but the entire 8-season run of Full House, they never call him Uncle Joey.
I'm gonna keep a close eye on that.
Okay, there you go.
That's right.
He's just Joey. Jesse is Danny's dead wife's brother.
Right.
But Joey is just their friend.
I think that you can call him an uncle. I
think that you could call him an uncle too. But as far as it was something that blew my mind as I went back to watch Full House.
That is kind of the joke a lot of the time on that show, and I didn't realize it until we were rewatching. But like, there's a lot of stuff going on in that house that is very much just like, and Joey.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. You ought to know that that's what Full House is.
That's actually that's totally not fair though, because you actually watch that first season of that show and you realize how much of it is predicated, at least in the beginning, on him and Jesse. Because I was not aware of this. This is actually something that Tessa filled me in on, but apparently like Bob Saget was like supposed to play that role, couldn't play that role, supposed to play that role, couldn't play that role. So essentially when they were like building that first season, they just didn't know who was going to be that third person. So there's so much that is dedicated to just Joey and Jesse getting into shenanigans. And it's funny because you can literally see them write like I want to keep calling him Bob Saget. No, Danny.
Danny.
They keep
Danny
writing him
Tanner.
out of the scene. Like they'll come up with some excuse. He's like, I gotta go edit my videos, and then he'll disappear for the rest of the episode. Like, and then it'll just be them getting into like fucking like Three Stooges style shenanigans with the kids. Like, and so much of it is clearly like based on the two of them to the point where it's really hard to not just watch it as like a my two dads situation.
Right. It's one of these situations where he's like, my wife did all of the work at home.
Mhm.
I need my knucklehead friend and her single Lothario brother to come in and pick up the slack of my dead wife so that my life doesn't change.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the
and
first season of Full House.
what's also really like weird about that though is it toes a really strong line between the Mr. Mom joke of like, look at this man in charge of the house, but also like it's super saccharine and like melancholy in a lot of moments. So like there's these weird moments where they get super like emotional and deep and all of that together, and it's very, very weird balancing that against like the idea that you're supposed to be laughing at how these guys don't know how to like take care of children, because they clearly do, because they can talk to them on a very like mature level and actually like break stuff down for them in the moments when they need to for the cry. But like for the laughs, it's always like, oh no, another diaper, wah, wah. It's like so it's really interesting seeing those two things together and working as well as it does, because it does work. Like,
Oh, I mean, it's three men and a baby
mhm.
with
Yeah, it's that
two
entire
other
genre.
babies.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's.
It's Uncle Buck. It's got some great Uncle Buck moments with Joey specifically, and
Yeah.
then Jesse has a couple of really decent moments specifically with the baby, like him and that Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. Like for a kid that is clearly not trying to act off of anybody, the two of them act off of each other phenomenally.
Yeah, there's crazy chemistry between the two of them.
Yeah.
In just, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why Full House became a national phenomenon.
Despite the fact that it was like panned by critics.
Yeah. Well, it was
I
also,
didn't
it
know that
also,
either until I started watching it again. That's crazy to me that that show was considered like a problem.
well, how far
Like,
into it are you? Is going to be my
So-
question.
so first season, we are maybe episodes like 17 or 18 on first season.
Yeah.
So like we've only just started watching this week.
So what I'm really excited for, based on what we've just discussed, is the turn into two,
Mhm.
because
Is that
they
when Becky gets introduced and all that?
Becky doesn't get introduced until like maybe near the end of it.
Yeah.
like, she's
I know
very
that
much-
she's in a Christmas episode, but is that the Christmas episode for 3 then?
I think that, yeah, season 3 is where she becomes like a big deal with the family. I mean, again, this is going back. A lot of my Full House was learning how to play drinking games with rum and cokes. Is where I was introduced to. Is it just Kraken? Is that the name of the rum?
Kraken rum, yeah.
Yeah, Kraken
is-
rum. Kraken rum and cokes. Till like 2 a.m.
Nice.
because I had helped a couple of my friends move down the street in West Warwick, and we just like did that, and we had such a good time that was just what we did for hanging out at the time. But also they had just purchased a house, so like their funds are tight. So we buy 2 bottles of Coke and a bottle of rum, and just watch Full House DVDs,
Yeah.
drinking and drinking and drinking.
Yeah,
So
and I totally remember like the late Nick at Night viewings of that too and shit when we were in college and stuff.
yeah. So it's one of those things that that's what it's linked to. So a lot of my memory is like, if I were drunker right now, I could really soar with
State of
Full
mind.
House information.
Yeah.
But where I am right now, I just remember, like, because I was just
Get on my
suddenly getting drunk. So like, my normal level, that's where I like, why is Jesse's name not,
Not
Stephanopoulos?
Stephanopoulos or whatever it becomes. It's
Yeah.
like Jesse Cochran for
Yeah,
the first season or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that I had never really picked
Yeah.
up on in the early stuff with that, because that show is my age, like literally the same year as me. That show comes out, and right around the same time. It may be a couple of months older than me. So I remember growing up on that show and having it in the background, and I remember the late stuff a lot more than I do the early stuff for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So like it's just been so cool to like kind of dive back into it, and it's weird because again, like as saccharine as it gets, it hits that emotional stuff that like you don't really see in the early 2000s, like late 90s, right? We talk about this all the time. It turns into mean comedy. And then you slowly start to get that back until you have the culmination of that in things like Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And so it's like where we're at now and what we expect from sitcoms is this beautiful mesh of that early 90s, late 80s, like family saccharine comedy stuff that's going on in there, right?
Yeah,
In shows like Punky Brewster and My Two Dads and this, I mean, I think even like Family Ties, you can even kind of tie into that, even though that's a little bit older. Um,
I mean,
but
yeah. I today I finished Designing Women,
oh yeah,
and it's one of those things where, like, flip the switch from absurd friggin' comedy to like heavy emotional moments. Like,
hmm
it was the wrong thing to have on in the background at work, because
yeah,
there were times where I was like openly weeping,
right.
and then I need to like suddenly put my face back on because I had a student come in.
hmm Yeah, I think like honestly that Cheers is the last bastion of it, and it's funny that you can kind of see a split between the kind of show that Cheers is and then what Frasier becomes, because Frasier never really does that, right? Like at
Uh,
least the at least the length there's long stretches between those moments, unlike the every episode moment that you see in something like a Full House, right?
yeah, Frasier definitely had moments that made me like cry or brought a
Right,
tear to my eye,
right.
but
Not every episode
no,
though.
not every episode. And actually, I wonder if I would have had that same emotional reaction if I came from not Cheers. Like,
hmm
if I just started watching Frasier for Frasier, I think it'd be difficult for me to be emotionally invested in him as a character.
You know the show that breaks it entirely, completely breaks it and makes it okay to just not have those sad moments anymore?
Is it
Third Rock from the Sun.
right? All right, so here's the
Third
question.
Third Rock.
How old were you when you realized that the three male leads' names are Tom, Dick, and Harry?
In Third Rock?
Yeah.
32.
Okay.
I've never picked up on that.
Like, I think it's the greatest thing that they're just Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Man.
I've always loved that, and
I
it's
love
just
that show. I straight up reference that show on a daily basis. Anytime somebody talks about tipping, I talk about that show. Anytime somebody talks about 3D TV, I talk about that show.
God. The big giant head was William Shatner,
Oh,
and Newman was there. Newman.
oh man.
Newman was there like while he was still Newman too. Good for Wayne Knight. I'll use his real
And
name.
in that same frame, he comes off of Jurassic Park, right? Like
Yeah.
like he a lot of his big roles in that like early '90s, mid '90s time.
Yeah. Crazy, just crazy. But yeah, Third Rock from the Sun. Yeah, they're you know what though, there are still episodes that sometimes hit me emotionally. Again, I know that I'm just kind of like
Right.
wide
I'm
open from
that,
emotion from TV though.
that kind of show though, I'm willing to chalk that up to just your investment is a lot deeper than a lot of other people, right? Like I
Yeah.
think generally the overall consensus is that's not a show you go to for sappy moments. It's a show you go to for very good dumb comedy. I mean, you've got Oscar nominee John
Lithgow. His name.
no, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was thinking of the kid there, Gordon Levitt.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
I keep wanting to call him Justin. Yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. You have him there. You have John Lithgow. I mean, you have guys like Wayne Knight coming in who are like, I mean, TV superstars at that point. I mean, yeah.
French
Oh, and
Stewart. Like, let's just
French Stewart is doing something in that show that is super hard to make work, and he makes it work for. Doesn't that show go on for like 5 or 6 seasons?
yeah, I want to say
And he
seven.
doesn't ever
Does
he
that
doesn't ever
seven?
become he doesn't ever become like a joke outside of that show. You know what I mean? Like look at somebody like Chris Kattan who's doing that same kind of work on SNL night like every week in that same time period, and now like he's like a joke. You can't look at that dude in a movie and think that oh this is gonna work. Like but French Stewart now could show up in a movie and I'd be excited. Like
Well, I mean, all you need to look at is like TV roles. He
Mhm.
plays a super serious chef in Mom, and
That's
it's
right.
just like, this is French Stewart. This is
Yeah, I
like,
forgot the complete flip for him in that show.
yeah.
Man.
And then Kristen Johnson eventually shows up in that show. I don't know where Sally, like where Sally fits in with Tom, Dick, and Harry, but you know, there's the Solomons. That's the first king of the planet. It's just great. Just so much good world building in Third Rock from the Sun. And I will admit, every time that like I shed a tear when I watch that show, I'm like, why am I crying? What has happened to me?
But that's the line, right? Like at that point, you kind of hit that like mid '90s, late '90s. Like it's okay to just be goofy. We don't need to be sappy every episode, guys. Let's do this thing. And then it slowly devolves even further once 9/11 comes around and changes everybody's perception of like entertainment and comedy. Like, and suddenly we want something that's much darker, much more like we want to be angry even when we're laughing.
Yeah.
And that's when you get like, to bring it back to the stand-up stuff that you were talking about earlier. That's when guys like Lewis Black take off. God love the guy. Like he was one of my first like true loves as a stand-up comedian. Like a lot of guys will talk about who was the dude back in the 80s that used to do all the really mellow bits and then like did a whole like thing on JFK.
Stephen
God,
Wright.
I'm not gonna remember his name. No, Bill. I'm gonna lose it.
Sorry, I was trying to distract you.
No, Bill Hicks. That's who I'm talking about.
Okay.
So like you have your Bill Hicks who's like doing like very angry comedy in the late 80s and it's working, and then that disappears because we hit that 90s period where nobody wants to be mean anymore because things are so great. And then it kind of rolls back around. And the way that I feel about Lewis Black is I think the way that some people talk about Bill Hicks, like Garth Ennis, like gushes about Bill Hicks and in fact even wrote him into Preacher like as a character. So like the way that people feel about Bill Hicks and the way that his comedy kind of defined like their view of the world is very much the way that I feel about Lewis Black. Everything from what he did on The Daily Show straight up to his like 2-hour special that he did at Carnegie Hall is just defining for me as like what my worldview and my ideas about how to treat people and things like that, right? And that could only have come after something like the break that we have after like September 11th and the Iraq War, and like the way that comedy goes just hardcore mean, because that's just how we're all feeling for that 10, 15 years, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I still think we're at a level of mean and like just questioning the point.
It's not Full House. You're right. Like what you get on TV now is not Full House, but you still get things nowadays that are so much sweeter. Like watching sitcoms. I mean, it's hard to not watch a whole slew of that stuff that we've talked about for years now. Man, the Superstore comes to mind. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is still running strong with its stuff. I mean, even some of the stuff that kind of
running. It's weakened a little in its 6th season. I feel bad saying it, but it's just one of those things.
But take it at its height, like for what we're talking about. Like, its height,
definitely.
It's the sweetest show on TV, right?
Well, they're a family.
Right, but like, and that's something that they could be allowed to be. I mean, even something like the Goldbergs, or I'm excited.
This is unrelated to what we're talking about, but I just had something on in the background, and a person said, "I just now realized that The Goonies is the '80s version of Stranger Things," and that kind of blew my brain apart.
Such a good joke.
I don't think it was a joke, Sejin.
Oh, that's even better. That makes me laugh.
It was like one of those moments where like, oh, it just occurred to me. And I'm like, I don't know how to react to the words that I just heard. I'm going to go record my podcast. So that's really where I'm coming to the mic from, is the last thing that I heard tonight was someone's sudden realization that The Goonies is Stranger Things, but for the 80s.
Can I ask you a question about the Goonies now that we're here?
Yeah, of course. Now that I've
found our way on this path, do you consider it a scary movie? Like, is it like obviously it's not a horror movie, but like there's definitely some stuff that happens in it. I just remember it being something that popped up a lot around specifically this time of year, fall watching. Like,
the octopus is very scary. Is the quote that immediately jumped to mind. Is Short Round saying that reference? But what? I cut you off. We're talking over each other. What were you saying?
No, everything that happens with Chunk is like super creepy, like weird stuff, right? At first, I mean, obviously the reveal that he is actually like super secretly the hero of that film is amazing, but it's predicated on the fact that at first you are very frightened by that character.
Do you mean Sloth?
Sloth, not Chunk. Chunk is the little kid.
Chunk is Sloth's best friend.
Yes, Chunk is the kid. Yeah,
You're going to come live at our house now.
It's also hard for me to talk about that movie and not deal with the fact that there's a lot of problematic 80s stuff in that movie.
Oh, yeah, it's super problematic 80s. I imagine now that we've scrubbed Revenge of the Nerds from the record,
Mm-hmm.
which it has been sort of scrubbed from the record. I was hanging out with some friends who are going to go up to New York Comic Con this coming weekend, and one's like, I'm thinking about for my cosplay outfit, I'm going to dress like Lamar from Revenge of the Nerds, and I'll have like a floppy javelin with me. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't dress as a character from Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah,
And
it's
he's
not the
like,
movie to do reference anymore.
and he's like, why? And I'm like, there's the whole rape thing, and just the way that they're
Also,
very
like,
reductive of women.
and Lamar is a perfect example of what's wrong with that movie. Like,
Yes,
I applaud the idea of that character, but I mean, there's so much wrong. I mean, even with the concept of him being a nerd, he's not a nerd. The whole point of his character is he's gay. That doesn't.
right.
That's a weird like
But
grouping. Like,
to make an argument though, nerd in that movie is
he's other.
sort of a synonymous with meek.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. It means other, and so like everything it becomes a quote unquote nerd in that movie.
I mean,
But
that's
it's such a
the
weird,
end. Is that like, if you've ever feel judged, that you're a nerd. I'll do my Judah Friedlander
I think
voice.
what it is it pisses me off how much of a nerd he actually is, and that's not what they focus on. Because like fuck me, the song at the end of that movie when he fucking like puts together that guitar and like puts together that entire bit for them is phenomenal. And the fact that that comes out of nowhere because you didn't know up until then that he like had that kind of talent is upsetting.
Right, like it's not a good movie, but that's
No,
the
it's
thing
not.
is that they've
It's not a good
scrubbed.
movie.
The Say report does not approve of Revenge of the Nerds, Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise, Revenge of the Nerds 3, The Next Generation, or Revenge of the Nerds 4, Nerds in Love.
We just know these things, okay?
I just know about them, and that's the thing. I just want to say that now that we have officially scrubbed it, because I told them, I'm like, maybe try watching it again and see if dressing as Lamar is the best idea for
I will give him
Comic
credit
Con.
that if you're gonna pull a character out of that movie, Lamar really is like a pretty decent character to pull in that while what he represents is upsetting, he is a character in that movie. He doesn't ever do anything super shitty, unlike, say, your main character.
Oh, you mean the rapist?
Yeah, exactly. Um, Fuck me. Yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah, so like Goonies could possibly fall into that. I think it's saved by a lot. I think it falls very firmly in the category of like the drunk uncle, where like, yeah, he's got a problem, but he's invited to every party because we love him. Like I think it's gonna very much land on that because there isn't anything as drastic as that. There's definitely problems with the ways that like again otherness is treated, especially specifically like mental issues and and deformities and things like that are very upsetting. But also like he gets a lot of love as a character, right? Like you're always going to have that argument. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And yeah, it's very, no one's raping anybody in the Goonies.
No, and
Though,
have a cast.
Reggie's really trying with Andy. I mean, he's definitely, like, when he's using his rear view mirror to try to look up her skirt.
Yeah, he's got to learn no means no. Like
Yeah.
that's definitely is with this. That lesson needs to be learned. But we're also supposed to feel that he is a little bit skeevy, right? Like he's not supposed to be a perfect character. So that's weird. Like
Well, he's a bad guy. He's not
Right.
he's not a Goonie in any way, shape, or form. And somehow he gets hit by the water when they're all playing with the pipes. The Goonies. My problems with the Goonies all stem from logistics and the fact that it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm sitting in the bathroom at a country club, which, first of all, I don't know how the country club pipes are underneath that restaurant that the Fratellis are using as their base of operations, and a geyser of water shoots me into the ceiling, later that night, I'm not hanging out with my football team bros making wishes about getting laid at the town wishing well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No, like there's very much a magical realism about that movie. I
Right.
mean, there's a fucking pirate ship that floats out to the ocean at the end.
I mean,
I think we can spoiler alert for the Goonies. There's this friggin' pirate battle at the end of that movie.
yeah, but in terms of a scary movie, I think of it as a fall movie.
Mhm.
And I think it's more of a fall movie because, like, it's the end of their summer. Like
Yeah.
that's sort of the big thing is this is going to be our last Goondocks adventure because summer is coming to a close, and we're all going to have to move from where we
I
live.
I
Like,
wonder if my view of that movie is colored by the fact that it would very often come on like WB afternoon like movies. I'll usually in a two-parter with The Burbs, which is firmly like a horror comedy. Like
yeah,
as much as it may not be like a fall movie, which is weird. I don't think of The Burbs as a fall movie, but it's definitely a scary movie. Whereas like The Goonies, I think of as a fall movie, but I don't necessarily think of it as scary. So like, because like The Burbs is the kind of movie you watch in like February.
yeah, exactly. You watch The Burbs in February after the Super Bowl. It's
Hmm.
like that's the I've only ever watched The Burbs in February after football is all done. Like that is the truest statement I
Yeah,
may have ever said about The Burbs.
yeah.
Uh,
That movie deserves a
specifically The
remake. That movie
Burbs.
deserves a Fright Night style remake, which is firmly on my list for Hollow watching this year.
God, which
So
the remake or the original?
the remake, I mean, I love the original too. The original holds a special place in my heart because I have such a love for practical effects, and that movie is
Chock full
just
of them.
yeah, it's gorgeous with them. So in terms of like watching, I will probably give that a watch this year, but I also find it very hard to recommend because there's a lot of really old school like stuff about like what's his name? Not the main character, the vampire hunter who turns out to be a fraud. The guy that has the TV show. The I forget what his name is. David Tennant plays him in the
I
remake.
know. I
He's
can't think of
phenomenal.
his name in the
Roddy
original.
McDowell plays him in the original, and it's
Right.
awesome. And his character being the late night midnight movie character, I think makes sense to like you and me, and would probably make sense to people like a couple of years younger than us. But it'd be hard pressed for me to find a 20-year-old that would get that reference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
So like,
I made sure Dale saw the original before we saw the remake.
yeah,
God, 10 years ago.
yeah.
Was the Fright Night remake 10 years ago,
Anton Yelchin's last films, man. Like, yeah, I think
or
he
was it
did two or three after that.
2011? I don't know. I love that movie. The remake is so good. There
Yeah,
is that scene right in the middle, and I know you know the scene that I am talking about. I don't know if I want to, because I'd like to recommend people watch it, and then maybe we could talk about it a little
the
bit
one with the
later.
rooms in the house, and then eventually like the
Yep.
pipes in the ground. Yeah,
Yeah. No. No.
yeah. I mean that whole that
yeah.
whole moment is yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment that like all hairs on my body are standing on end because of just how electric that moment was.
Yeah.
That was the movie that I'm like, I'll see it in 3D because I need to see this one in
I
3D.
forgot. I saw that shit in 3D, and I own it in 3D, and I always forget that until I open it up and the 3D glasses pop out, and I'm like, oh yeah.
Because that scene, that electric scene in 3D, is the most immersed I've ever felt in the film, which is crazy because I've seen things like Galaxy, which is really Gravity, but all I wanted to say was Galaxy.
That's fine.
Um,
It could
and
be
that, and that was another one where like I kind of felt like I was in space, but nothing compared to Anton Yelchin thought he won, but he was wrong.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
I want to see
really
the
feel like
second, the sequel to that. That
the first
sort of
one, the weird all girls school one, that one.
right. No, so Fright Night 2, yeah, there's that one, but then there's a semi remake of Fright Night 2, the one that you just talked about, that released like 5 years after the Anton Yelchin one.
Oh,
That like I saw it at a Redbox
Not
once,
aware of
and I'm
that.
like, I kind of want to watch you.
yeah, yeah. We totally gotta watch that one, man. Definitely gonna put Banana Splits on the watching.
I'm
for
so upset
for
that you
a
haven't
couple
seen it
things.
yet.
It's gonna be big at some point. So we're starting up B movie nights again in the house, and so I'm trying to decide what's gonna fall into that. Banana Splits might end up in that night
Well, it
because
does start with the letter B, so if you're looking for B movies,
but yeah, I've been trying to put the list together, trying to figure out what to watch. You know, for me specifically this year, because we've got a ton of really good family stuff that we're gonna check out. Like the girls haven't seen Paranorman yet, so we're gonna definitely watch that. You know, I want to get in on Corpse Bride again because I feel like it's the bastard stepchild in that vein of the claymation movie, and that's not fair because I think it's actually a super well made movie.
I hate that
Also,
movie. I
yeah,
hate it.
why?
I hate it because, and it's very strange because it did exactly what Tim Burton wanted to do.
Yeah.
He achieved his ultimate end goal with The Corpse Bride. So
Which is
like in that scenario, can I be upset with him for making a movie that got him everything that he desired? I don't
but
know.
but what do you is
Well,
there like a specific thing you're talking about? Like what do you mean?
the fact that like Tim Burton is now Disney's go-to for like a certain type of remake, like Alice in Wonderland, like Dumbo.
Oh.
There are so many moments in Corpse Bride that are just like lifted from other Disney movies, and it totally felt like Tim Burton's reel to show Disney I am capable of taking your stuff and adapting it.
Oh, see, the thing that I love about that is I think what it is it's super emblematic of Tim Burton's love of those things, of the Disney style, of the Disney movie, but also wrapped up in his own, I mean, to be honest, like mental issues that he has been very open about, has been
Mm-hmm.
very driving in his artistic force. So like his depression and his fascination with death, his fascination with gothic culture and stuff like that. And it's not goth culture. Like it's very key to mention that it is gothic and not goth, because he's not out there like having Marilyn Manson show up in his movies, like right? Like he is very, it's very important that what he's harkening back to is the same kind of stuff that honestly like guys like Guillermo are
Yeah.
also looking back on, you know, like that whole oh man, Crimson, it's not Crimson Tide, what is it?
Crimson Peak.
Crimson Peak has to go on the list. I just
Crimson
realized
Peak was
that.
such a good movie.
Yeah,
Oh.
but that whole like sensibility, right? I mean, even in some ways, you can even look at like Shape of Water and see like, oh, there's a very gothic sensibility
Oh yeah,
here. I
no,
mean,
definitely.
like that whole love story with the monster is, yeah, it's beautiful, right? So it's that marrying of the two cultures, and I think that you see it more in Corpse Bride than you do in something like, say, Nightmare Before Christmas, which anybody that knows me knows that's top three movies of all time for me. One of them is definitely, depending on what day of the week, it might change position, but it's always in that top three. And like there's this there's this thing in Corpse Bride though that you see, and I think it's the freedom that he is given later in his career that he didn't necessarily have in that early on. And so you really truly get to see Burton be Burton in Corpse Bride in a way that you don't always in that people equate a lot of that movie of Nightmare Before Christmas to Burton, and they forget that not Henry Selick. Man, I'm having a great night tonight.
The
What's his name?
musician guy,
No, the director, Zemeckis.
Zemeckis. Yeah.
Um, yeah, where you it's not
Wait, he
Zemeckis.
didn't direct it. I thought it was a lady who directed Nightmare
No, it's the
Before
dude that also
Christmas.
then goes on to do it's the dude that also goes on to do James and the Giant Peach and stuff. Um,
Oh, but I thought Zemeckis. I don't know.
it's not
We're going
Zemeckis.
around in
It's
circles with this,
yeah, but
unfortunately.
he didn't. But everybody forgets that Tim Burton didn't direct that movie.
Right.
He was he was the creative director for it, and he designed all of the characters, and he did the initial story, but he didn't even like write the script for that movie.
Hmm.
So like a lot of that movie gets credited to him, and it should. I'm not saying that he should not be credited for that masterpiece, but it is something that you have to remember. There is like a he is not the auteur on that one, that he is on Corpse Bride, and that's why I think that that's a much more fascinating movie to watch.
Yeah. I mean, that's
No, though, that I don't talk about Corpse Bride often, whereas I will talk about Nightmare Before Christmas at the drop of a hat. Yeah.
yeah, and that's one of those things where all of my feelings of Corpse Bride come from my initial viewing of it. Like I
Mhm.
haven't viewed it again, but it was just one of those things where I was young. It was that like 2006. I think that one came out.
Yeah.
Maybe
In that vein,
2008. Like it's that time
not
period.
later than that.
Later than that, Corpse
No,
Bride?
not later than that.
Oh,
is what
not
I'm
later
saying.
than that. Okay, sorry. And it's one of those things where like I was still young and I saw it and I'm like, this is very much Tim Burton trying to say I can do Disney. Because there are just so many things that feel lifted from Disney stories and that, and on the one hand, it's cool to see it through that lens, but on the other hand,
It's totally Henry Selick. I don't know why I stopped myself from saying that. I think I was thinking of Tom Selleck at the same time and thought,
Okay.
that's not right.
all right, good. Well, thank you,
Yes.
Henry Selick. But yeah, it's just one of those. It's one of those situations where I was going through a phase at the time. Like I did my speech in Com 100 before I was asked to leave Com 100 again for the third and final time.
Yeah.
Was I did something on like Hollywood and its lack of originality in terms of
Yeah.
remakes, which is really interesting that someone cited me as the person they go to know if a remake is worth watching or not. And I think it's interesting because I'll say like 10 years ago, I was so against them until I realized that, like, well, the other stuff doesn't go away. And, maybe there's something else to be found within it. That being said,
Also, the entirety of American art is
is based on it. Yes. I mean,
the
yeah,
idea
there's
of
stuff
like
that I learned,
remaking.
but it's
Yeah.
interesting to think that, like, that journey has, like, been visible to other people.
Yeah.
It was just crazy. Like, it was crazy to be like, why am I your go-to for that? And then I'm thinking,
That's the
like,
first time you realized you draw attention to yourself? Yeah.
no. Fuck.
I've known
Yeah,
that for years.
me? Why would you want to listen to me? No, it just was strange. And then I thought about it and I'm like, no, yeah, I it's something that I do. But part of the reason why I can do it now is because of how critical I was of it when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like, and also intelligent enough to know that, like, well, I'm critical of it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have merit. But again, I say all of that, and I don't think they should remake Back to the Future, which is the news that got me name checked.
Yeah, what? I'll give you the big one that's pissed me off, and I never thought that I'd be pissed off at the idea
Princess
of a remake.
Bride?
Yep. Exactly. That was the moment when I was like, "Oh no, is this the line for me?" I guess I found it. I thought it would. I thought I'd never find it, but I found it. I look, if they want to do it, I will see it and I will give it its due. That is where I have landed after 2 days of like fuming on it. I came to the realization of like, this is stupid. I feel this very specific way about this thing, about the idea of remakes and about the idea of what movies can and can't be made. And distinctly, my feelings are there isn't a movie that can't be made. It just, if it's made, it has to be judged on the merits of the way that it was made. And so I need to wait until that movie comes out to decide whether or not, how I feel about it really. But man, there was a couple of days there where I was just like, is this it? Is this the moment when I become an 80-year-old man and I'm just like, get off my lawn?
The thing is, and especially based on everything that we've spoken up to this point, there was something magical about filmmaking in the 80s that it would be difficult, in my opinion, to recapture that in something like a Back to the Future or Princess Bride remake.
Yeah.
Like, the awe of it all. Like, yeah. There are some movies that are directly affected by the time that they were released, but that doesn't make them period pieces.
I gotta be honest, man. That's all movies. I mean, that's my thinking. It's like all movies are affected by the time they're created. So you talk about something like Back to the Future, and this is probably what you're getting at. But like, it's hard to watch that movie and not think, on top of everything, look at how 80s this movie is. Like, it's such an 80s movie. So for to not make it in the 80s, like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the whole time travel thing. But the funniest thing about Back to the Future, and like one of the things that influenced it, is that for some reason the 50s were like huge in the cultural mind in the 80s.
American Graffiti and Happy Days, like those
right,
two
right.
things.
Well, I mean,
Ron
that's
Howard,
the 70s though. But then the kids who grew up with them picked up on it, and that's why like Dirty Dancing is set in the 50s.
Yep. Because
people love 50s music, and it's like weird. It's just this weird thing. That,
I mean, the 50s was another huge turning point. As much as I'm going to be the guy that brings up something like the 2000s and 9/11 and the Iraq War being a huge turning point for our people our age, like that is the kind of shit that people were going through with World War II, Vietnam War. Like every generation has that breakage moment, has that moment where the threshold just gives, right, and we find a new threshold, and then that eventually gives for the next generation. And so like I think that's what it is I think for people in the 80s, that threshold moment where their world kind of changed was the 50s, because that's what then defined things in the 60s and 70s.
Man, it's blowing my mind, because it's glimpsing at nostalgia, and this fact that the 50s were something to be nostalgic about because it was that last like great time of prosperity in America. And now us and this whole generation, this post 9/11 generation, I'll talk about it after, but it's one of those things where like that's why we're nostalgic for the 90s,
Mhm.
But along with that are things like in the 90s, you had Nazi marches in Florida. You had the riots in LA. You
Yep.
had rampant political correctness.
The OJ trial.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you had like, just because we're like, oh, DuckTales, man, I remember when I was a kid. Like, there's a nasty side of nostalgia too. That if you're going to be tilling the farm so
What are we,
that
3 years in? Did we finally hit that realization? Yeah, man. Like, yeah, yeah.
it's not finally hitting that. It's just like really under like coming to full grasp and terms
Mhm.
with why everything is the way that it is right now.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, man. Is as much as we can fucking run around in MAGA hats all we want. Like at the end of the day, like nostalgia has a side to it that is just rooted in racism, sexism, isms. It is just rooted in a time when things could be simpler means that you were simplifying somebody's otherism out of existence. And that fucking sucks. Like to have your whatever it is that makes you you put into a box and shipped out because everybody wants to just focus on just black and white issues, and it's funny that you bring up the idea of the 50s being explored in something like Dirty Dancing. It's also super important to realize that for a movie that harkens back to the 50s and thinks about it as such a simpler time, like name three diverse characters in that cast. Like there's a sense to when we start looking backwards, like yeah, it's important and it's good, but you can't let yourself get lost in stuff in the past because there's a reason we progressed forward. Like you can't forget that. There's a reason that we progressed.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a lot of this realization is representative of the fact that I did just finish Designing Women. And I
Mhm.
said it in in our personal Discord where we talk that I found my season 1 episode 16 of Cheers in season 7 episode 20 of Designing Women.
Yeah.
And that is these episodes that like they make the characters so afraid of something that they've been fine with up to that point,
Mhm.
and so it just feels like you're watching a morality play. But then even weirder than that, right? Because the episode The Lying Game,
Yeah.
called that way because it turns out that one of the women's boyfriend is a cross-dresser, and just because he likes dressing up like a woman is not because he wants to be a woman. He is not transgendered. It's just like I like the way it makes me feel.
Yeah.
He is not, and they treat that like it's the dirtiest thing in the world. But it doesn't feel like a play the way that the like Cheers episode where they're afraid that Cheers is going to be a gay bar
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But then
I mean, part of that is because every episode of Cheers feels like it's a play because it's written by playwrights. But
yeah,
that,
yeah,
but I know what you mean, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then the next, which is the final episode of Designing Women, is called Gone with the Whim. And they're very much in a recreation of the set for Gone with the Wind. They're decorating that, and they all imagine themselves in the movie, like as Scarlett or as it's just like this is weird because this one actually feels like a play.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
watching it, and Anthony, Misha Taylor, he's like, you all have these nostalgic thoughts and this love of that movie. I don't, as a black
Yeah.
man, like a movie where people are called Mammy and Pappy. Like, it reminds me of that, like, if I lived in that time, my roommate would be Kunta Kinte. And it's just like, and I hear that, and I'm like, wow, Designing Women, the finale, 1993, just the same type of stuff that's being said today
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
a way that like I thought we covered this and I thought we had like learned to get past it, but really did we find something to be nostalgic for in the 90s to ignore it?
Yeah.
Like the 70s maybe? I don't did we get
I mean, like
I mean, The
for people in the
Fugitive.
90s, people got really kind of in. I mean, no, I mean, like you can definitely look back at this. Look at Dazed and Confused, and that like whole that whole mentality of people coming out of that sort of stuff. You know, we definitely reach back for the time of hippie culture and all of that because things were starting to get good. And in the 90s, sorry, is where you get the formation of the yuppie, which is definitely people looking back on their parents growing up in the 70s, but also having money. Like I mean, you definitely have that mentality in the 90s. I mean, honestly, you just got to look 20 years back. That's the key because you hit that age group of the people that start to get making art and start to buy stuff. So those two things coming together are going to give you the era that we are looking back at. Whatever we're nostalgic for is always going to be 20 years back. Like
I gave, before TED Talks existed, a TED Talk in the food court of the Providence Place Mall.
and I'm sure everybody adored it.
The fourth time I saw 300, about how anything 10 years old is played out, it's boring. 20 years old we're nostalgic for, and 30 years old is brand new. Yeah. I could not remember this monologue that I delivered, but like that was the central thesis of it because
this is just a tribute.
Yeah. It just thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It's just one of those things that I even though that's something that I've like really internalized, just knowing that that's how our world work doesn't mean that when you find something that like can be picked up and examined through that filter, it doesn't kind of blow your mind.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. I don't know where I honestly don't know what this show is tonight. And that's sort of what this show is, the Say Report, and it's what I really enjoy about it, is we can do an episode like this where I wanted to come in and tell you my theory on that like made River City Girls palatable and talk to you about playing arcade games and go-karts this weekend. But no, I'm very happy that I got something more substantial to talk about.
Yeah, it's been hard because there's been a lot of upsets this week. I mean, we failed to mention why we really got on this kick with the comedy stuff and everything going on right now with people using comedy as a catch-all excuse to allow themselves to say whatever the fuck they want, apparently. And that's a huge thing right now. The firing of Shane, I don't even remember the whole name. What's his name?
The SNL
Shane
guy.
McGillis. Yeah, I mean, like firing before the season even began of this guy because it turns out that his comedy is not great, and I'm curious how he even got into a room with Lauren Michaels. That's the story I want to find out. That's that nobody seems to be talking about is what got this guy to a point where he got this audition. Because like looking back on a lot of his comedy now, because I mean it's hard not to with Twitter posting bits from him every 2 seconds. I just don't understand like where the appeal came from, you know? Like if this was 20 years ago, I almost could tell like he very much fits into like an off-brand Norm Macdonald in some ways. But that's my reading on him, I guess. But it's so you got that going on. Then you got people who are bringing George Carlin, digging him up out of his grave, and I want to slap every person that's done it, even the people using him for defense. It's just like his mentality is based on where he was in the world.
Yeah, I know.
We are not there anymore. Yeah.
I mean, his mentality was so based on where he personally was in the world.
And he'd be the first to admit it.
Yeah,
like, that
exactly.
was the whole point.
But you look at his entire career, it runs the gamut because of just who he was. And like he kind of got mean near the end of his life. And it kind of makes sense because he was rebelling against something. Age.
I mean,
it's just
part of it was like because he realized that as a human being he was going to lose the fight eventually, for sure. But another part of it is that he saw towards the end of his life he wasn't stupid. Like he saw what was going on and that the way things were going in terms of the bad people getting worse and the good people getting kind of shitty because they were so good. Like he realized that the breakage was coming to a point where, lo and behold, we were going to have another threshold moment, which I think we might be in right now. We're due for one, for sure. And if you want to talk in terms of generations, and I think we're in one. I mean, this next couple of months here, up to the next couple of years, is going to get pretty interesting around us.
Yeah. God, it's so strange. And I said I never wanted to do like stand-up comedy, and that's true. I never really did. I wanted to be in an improv troupe. Like that was my goal in high school because I got taken to an improv night in 9th grade in Providence. And I'm like, I want to be part of this.
Yeah.
And, I searched and I never could find a troupe, or anytime I auditioned, they're like, you're too young for us, which I don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, oh, I guess I'll find a Zoltar machine
I mean, I'll
and
tell you
wish
what it
to be
really is.
big. Like,
It's a shit excuse because it's that problem that we have right now in the world where people equate age and wisdom with experience and all this stuff, and all of that shit's nonsense because like people just got to be given the chance to obtain that stuff before they can do it. It's the same problem when you go in for a job interview and they're like, "You have no experience doing this job," but it's like the only way I get it is if you hire me for it. You shithead.
yeah,
Like,
that's six in one, half dozen in the other. You're saying
right?
the same thing.
Uh-huh.
It's that, but the only real goal, and I think of this often whenever SNL comes up, because I haven't watched SNL. I kind of want to say like in forever.
Probably.
Like I watched it when it was on. Well, my father's watching it right now. As I came downstairs, because two things were taping on the DVR, he put on the SNL on Hulu.
Well, your
And
dad does love Billie Eilish, so I can
I mean, it
definitely
makes
understand.
sense, right? No, I mean, and again, and apparently Woody Harrelson was the host.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
like, I'm like, I could see why this would appeal to my father. But like, even when I was younger, it would be on Comedy Central, and I could maybe watch a sketch before I'd be like, I am exhausted by you. Um,
Always ahead of the curve, man.
uh, but there was a girl in high school who's like, if I don't one day see you on Saturday Night Live, it will be the greatest like injustice in my life. And that's a thing that I think on often. And it's not like, so because that was said to me, and this is not like, it's not like, oh, I need to impress this girl. Like that's not ever how my mind really worked. It was
Hmm.
just like, oh, this is a validation that I'm funny. So like, why don't I go for it? And I looked into it, and like, how you got on SNL was to already be popular, but like a ladder rung below SNL.
Yeah.
And like, so you
Yeah.
already needed to be established. Like, it wasn't your start point. You needed to climb halfway up the ladder before you even got there. So I'm wondering, with this Shane person, is that his name? I don't.
Shane McGillis, I think, is the full
Okay,
name. As somebody that has not looked it up, by the way.
that's fine. I just that's I didn't need you to look it up. The stuff that he did, like, it sounds like podcast stuff, and it's that kind of stuff where I'm like, oh, should we not be doing a podcast? Like, am I just screwing myself over for any potential future employment by doing
No.
a podcast? And I'm like, I certainly hope not. Especially because I think we approach most topics from a very, you know,
Open mind?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the whole philosophy of the show is positivity. So I think it'd be very difficult to listen to anything that we say and be like, well, they hate this. Though I do kind of hate Revenge of the Nerds. Like years later, I'm not afraid to say that. And if
Never made
that
it
means I
alive.
can't be
That's
on
all that I care
SNL
about.
one day, then you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't belong on SNL. Oh no, we love Revenge of the Nerds here at Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
If you
man.
can't quote it all verbatim, you're not even getting a shot. Uh, but it's just one of those things where he probably had a following, and they don't care about the content; they just care about the following that
Yeah.
that person has and
Maybe.
the potential ratings that it can bring to the show.
Yeah.
And that's what SNL has always looked like to me. Is
Yeah.
more of a showcase, not in the beginning. Obviously, in the beginning, it was a bunch of guys who were on cocaine
Obviously.
doing
Yeah.
doing comedy because somehow they tricked SNL into giving them a TV show
Yeah, I
Saturday
like how
night at
like everybody
midnight.
forgets the reason that it starts Saturday at fucking midnight on the East Coast and goes until 2 a.m. is because they were on so much fucking coke that they needed to blow that energy off on Saturday nights. Like we're past the point where everybody's doing that now. Can we change the time on it? Can it be like 9 o'clock Eastern time? Nice a nice solid 7 o'clock like in the mountain time zone. I love that.
Yeah, nothing else is on Saturday night. Like
Right.
it's weird. It's such a weird comedy artifact
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And I'm sure that if you combed through what Saturday Night Live has done, they probably wouldn't look great in the
No,
grand
of
scheme of
course.
things.
Oh, of course not. If you went back and did some stuff, I mean, like, I love Eddie Murphy, but man, like every other character for him back in the day. Remember his Gumby, like his like
Yeah,
neighborhood Gumby
how would I
episode, or
not remember Gumby?
what was the weird Mr. Rogers knockoff that he did that is both phenomenal and super upsetting at the same time? He did like
Uh,
but it was another hood character. Like
yeah.
he, yeah, no, for sure, man. They definitely have got some stuff that they've got to deal with if they ever look back. So right, so like where are they in terms of who they hire with that sort of background of their own, right?
Right.
It's
That's
interesting.
that was the weird thing about it, and that's why it kicked off that whole debate. But I feel like no one ever was like, yeah, but look at some of the stuff that they did, like
Yeah.
in terms of mental
Well,
illness
and for
and
me, it's like
stereotypes.
it's a place. The other thing about SNL that people seem to not really, be talking about is like it is a place for growth as a comic. You have a lot of guys that went onto that show that were super like sketchy in their stand up and not as well established as they could have been because God bless them for all the weirdness. They do find some amazing talent in the weeds. It's not like they bring on somebody who's already super established, but like you said, they've got a little bit of a following enough where somebody can say, "Hey, I think there's something there," and then they grow that shit. Look, I mean, like look at Tracy Morgan. I love the guy, and he went through some serious shit that he had to deal with in terms of like his humanity before he became the guy that he is now. It's why the character of Chasey Jordan for him is so fabulous, and why Tina Fey like both did him a favor and also on top of that needed him for 30 Rock because like that character is who Tracy Morgan was when he first showed up at SNL. Like as much as that like that joke of him in that very first episode of running through traffic in his underwear is like a direct pull of Martin Lawrence reference, nice 360 there. But it also was kind of where Tracy Morgan was headed. I mean, he was about to become like Richard Pryor head on fire running down the street, like if he wasn't careful. And like he openly admits that SNL saved his life because he got that gig and like the people around him helped him cultivate his comedy and his lifestyle. And that has been like key for a lot of those people, right? So in a weird way, I'm kind of disappointed that they kind of booted this dude. I mean, I get that they needed to, but it'd be cool to know that he ended up in a place where he's going to learn something from this. And I don't feel like he has. Whereas if he had just been allowed to be hired, but people gave him the shit that he deserved, and then like he was able to like grow as a comedian, is that maybe the better outcome? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think about like Jenny Slate. I believe was
Hmm.
like a one and done on SNL,
For like, well, yeah, I think
and
she got one season and was wrote out of like 1,000 sketches, but yeah.
yeah. But I feel like even just being part of it for that type of thing
Hmm.
really changed the trajectory of who she was as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's strange, and but yeah, they definitely it is. It's a ground. Look at Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy
Hmm.
Fallon is going to be the person that I put up for the whole. If it weren't for SNL, like he probably
he
would
wouldn't
be.
he wouldn't know where he was
Yeah,
right now. Yeah, yeah,
because
for sure.
when he first got to that show, like he was not good on camera, and like he couldn't not laugh at what was going on. But now he hosts the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I mean he's the Cinderella story of that show for sure.
yeah, it's weird. I don't know. We got into a groove here that really like I love this. I feel oddly electrified by this topic. But I know that like the time has come and so we close the final curtain or call the final curtain. I don't know the lyrics to My Way. That's my resolution for next year is to learn the lyrics of Frank Sinatra's My Way.
I mean, I was afraid you were going to start singing "Send in the Clowns," and I was going to be like, "That doesn't work at the end of the show."
No, that's the beginning song. You know what I'm gonna reference? I'm gonna reference the fact that a song that references My Way is
Oh,
Bon
you're big
Jovi.
Misfit fandom. Oh, Bon Jovi. Okay,
Is
right.
Bon Jovi, and It's My Life. And my favorite lyric in that song is when he goes, "The Tommy and Ginas who never back down." Like he references his own songs. Bon Jovi, you're so kinda cool. You got to date Ally McBeal.
He's the cool stepdad. He really is. He's like the guy that like, all right, you're cool, but you're still a stepdad, so I'm like in public I'm giving you shit, but at home we get to hang out together.
It's cool that we get to play catch at home and that
hmm
you like don't hold me to your standards of masculinity, but
You
you're
know, and in
still not
20
my
years we'll
real
have
dad.
Thanksgiving together and I'll talk about what a great stepdad you were, but you're gonna have to put up with 18 years of shit first. Give me that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
All right.
Fuck. We gotta come to the end though. You're not wrong. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about this week that I'm just gonna bang out there because they are kind of time sensitive in that I just want people to just get on this shit. Disenchantment season 2 came out last Friday and it's perfect. The way that it grows the world, the way that every character is evolved, I mean, the way that it deals with everything that happened at the end of that last series, it is becoming slowly my favorite fantasy story that I've heard in a long time. Um, like it's in terms of television watching, like I couldn't put up with Game of Thrones, but man, I'm putting up with Disenchantment. I love it. Um, but yeah, so that's a big thing for me this week.
Oh, okay. Uh, I guess I'm gonna say go see Abominable. Originally Everest
Promote this one. Yes, yes.
is awesome,
Is it?
and is the third Yeti movie in a year because it came out September 27th, and Smallfoot came out September 28th, 2018. So within 365 days, we got Smallfoot, The Missing Link from Leica, and Abominable. And
I
Abominable is
might straight up go see it right after this podcast.
I think you should. I wholeheartedly
Did not realize it came out
recommend
today.
that. Yeah,
That's
it was Dale's birthday movie, especially since
Oh,
they canceled The Hunted and moved 21 Bridges.
I love it though. No, fuck those other movies. I mean,
No,
21
dude, we were
Bridges. That's
saying
my shit.
Abominable no
Oh,
matter what,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
we were going to follow up with one of those movies
I would have
before.
done 21 Bridges in a heartbeat. Shit.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, so see Abominable. It's incredible. I want to watch it again and again.
I'm excited. Chloe Bennett's been like out there like talking about it, and like I totally want to support her moving on from Shield, and so like I do definitely want to go get my butt in a seat for it. Um, and I'm excited to hear that it's good too. On top of all that,
Oh yeah, and yeah, you guys go see Abominable. That's all we're gonna see. Season's probably gonna see it, and then we'll really dig into it next week.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So any other things before we
No, I mean we are getting into Hollow watching this week. I mean we are getting into the spooky season. The other big thing that I'm doing though is also Hollow video game watching. So like I you know just any thoughts and suggestions you guys want to send my way. Right now on the docket, I'm definitely going to play. I have no mouth and I must scream. I have to find the PC port of it. Zach has set me up with some info about that. And then I'm considering doing a full stream, like 6 hour stream, sometime in the next couple of weeks of me doing Gone Home, because as it's a good this time of year game, especially early in the month of October. So I'm thinking that's going to happen as well.
cool. I have Speed Gaming Live at the end of October, the beginning on the 25th. So I'm practicing a shit ton of Link to the Past randomizer with the tournament settings.
Nice.
My current average, eliminating my best and worst time, is 152 minutes. Is 1 hour 52 minutes.
Yeah, go dig
So,
up some of his old games on Twitch.
and I'm probably
They're
going to be
fascinating to
streaming
watch.
too, just to like so that I have records of them, so I can go back and I can see. But that's what
I
most of my October is going to be,
Yeah.
except October 4th. So the end of this week,
Mhm.
Ghostbusters Remastered is supposed to come out.
You say supposed to, like it might not.
I say that because like the information on it is just non-existent.
Is it still not coming out with multiplayer right away?
No
Or online?
multiplayer right out of the bat. And that's the reason that like I'm a little hesitant. Like I thought there might be like some review information or like maybe a trophy list would have dropped now that we're literally 4 days away from its release.
Yeah.
So I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm gonna definitely be playing the Ghostbusters game like through on Twitch because I just love the game so much,
Yeah.
and I want to play it and I want to experience it again,
Sweet.
and it will be a nice break. Also, Link's Awakening is on the Switch,
Yeah,
and
that came out, and there's some feelings and some thoughts out there. I definitely want to get my hands on it. sometime in the next coming weeks. So we're going to talk about it, even if I have to go to a Redbox and rent it at this point.
Oh, you guys have them at Red Boxes? We don't have it at our Red Boxes yet.
Oh yeah. We got all sorts of Switch games and Redboxes out here. It's real big. You end up with a lot of rich kids out this way, so we luck out on that sort of shit.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I have thoughts on it too, but I've been waiting for you to play it before we even talk about it. So, fun things to look forward to this October from us.
Yeah.
So, keep listening to the Say Report. If you want to recommend any like scary movies for him to watch or to like follow along with what he's doing with his Hollow watching, Siegen is on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you want to hit up Dev about a really weird like connection point of all of this today, about some information on Horace and Pete, because I want to know his thoughts on it, but I don't want to necessarily get into it on the show.
I'd probably have to watch it before I had any thoughts on it.
Considering the talks we've had today about both the like what's going on in the world of comedy and your like beloved like Cheers and the way that it's sometimes the stage play, we should check it out. Hit Dev up at Devin D. Decker.
Excellent. So until next time, Will, who's got the grapefruit?
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.